Well, Charlie Sheen just might need that tiger blood. We've learned Warner Brothers has hired a couple of top guns to go after him. Two of the most powerful lawyers in Hollywood. Well, the studio is fighting Sheen over the 8 unfilmed episodes of 2.5 Men, plus Sheen's facing new allegations from his estranged wife. Will the actor be winning these legal battles? Let's bring in our legal panel, former prosecutor, defense attorney Keisha Heaven and defense attorney David Wohl. Good to see you both. Keisha, let me start with you. I mean, look, Charlie Sheen walks and talks and behaves like a lunatic. The drugs, the violence, the rants, he seems to a lot of people to be pretty seriously disturbed. That cannot be good for him in any kind of litigation, can it?
Absolutely not. What Charlie Sheen is not realizing is that the public is watching, and the fact that these recent antics of his, he's really making it easier for CBS to say, wait a minute, he's not fit to fulfill his part of the contract. So we're not breaching the contract. They don't have to go forward with these episodes.
And David, look, we don't have a copy of his contract, but usually there's a morals clause in the contract. Wouldn't he have breached that morals clause?
Just let's assume there is, Greg, and we don't know that. Up until this point, that has not been enforced, and there's a doctrine called estoppel and waiver, which means if you don't enforce it up to a certain point, you can't then invoke it. Look, they knew what they were getting into with Charlie Sheen. He had numerous run-ins with the law.
But
he had a drug and alcohol problem that repeated itself over and over again. And now,
but we have
Craig,
to.
This is like Mr. Well, wait a second, hold on. This is like Mr. Rogers' producers telling him not to be such a nerd in his show, or Martha Stewart's producers telling her not to be so domestic.
But did Mr. Rogers cause a harm?
It's the essence of who makes the show so great.
Okay, but
can't now just say, hey, he's out of control.
Did Mr. Rogers cause a harm to the public? Charlie Sheen is threatening to decapitate his child's mother.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I want to ask you this, Keisha. Sheen's lawyer is Marty Singer. He's a very well-known guy, very accomplished. He sends a letter to CBS and Warner Brothers with this duplicitous argument, on the one hand blaming them for doing nothing to help Sheen, but then on the other hand later overreacting by doing something. Now, that does not sound like a winning argument.
Absolutely not. And what they have to realize is if Mr. Sheen has a drug problem or if he has an alcohol problem, that has nothing to do with these irate, irrational, narcissistic comments and threats that he's been making in the public eye.
Yeah, you know what, David?
He's going to go ahead.
I want to switch over to the other thing, which is just, it's unbelievable to me. In court documents, Sheen's estranged wife said that he vowed to decapitate her and send her severed head to her mother. Now, we're not making this up. It's in court documents. But the LAPD hauls off and says, well, court statements are not enough to open a criminal investigation. That is utterly preposterous. There's nothing that could legally stop the LAPD from opening up a probe, is there?
Yeah, I have to agree with you right there. I mean, if there's evidence, and it's substantial evidence that a felony has been committed, they definitely should investigate it. But, the problem is the statute in California provides that the threat of this must be immediate, and there's no evidence that took place. And given Sheen's background, his lack of coherence, his drug use, the cops probably thought this is another example of him flying off the handle.
I bet she thought it was pretty immediate when it was uttered, assuming it was uttered.
She may well have.
You also have to look at the intent of the person who makes the threat, and clearly he intended for this threat to be carried out. It doesn't have to be, the immediacy is not the only element of the statute.
I'm looking at the statute because David sent it to us, and thank you, David. It says, is to be taken as a threat even if there is no intent of actually carrying it out. It could be an idle threat, but it's a criminal violation nevertheless.
Yeah, but Greg, it's got to be immediate and it's got to be unconditional, and they probably didn't think that existed. But Greg, again, back to this issue of the show. It's got to go on. The show must go on. Let me just say this. The show must go on if Sheen can participate and can fulfill his terms of the contract. And he's going to get a letter from his doctor saying he can do just that. And this show he'll get an injunction ordering that this show will go on.
But obviously he can't fulfill his part of the contract because he can't even speak in public.
What makes you say that?
Because, he's supposed to perform
he's a
on
crazy
a
and
sitcom
eccentric
show.
guy.
And he's making comments about the producer.
You know what? I don't want you guys to talk over each other too much, but I mean, he does appear on the set apparently at all times coherent and performs his job pretty darn well.
But Greg, that was prior to his last recent comments that he made in the public.
They're all crazy.
You know what, Greg? Recommending to him, you know what I would do, Greg, as his lawyer, I'd recommend get a clause in that contract that you do random drug testing. It's only fair, and it would assure everybody that you're sober.
But again, the drug issue is not the only issue. There's a mental problem here. It's not just drug abuse and alcohol abuse.
Maybe have him examined. And good luck with that one. Keisha Hebben and David Wohl, thank you so very much.
A tornado.